What would you do if you woke up one morning only to discover that everything you've spent the last 15 years building, your reputation, your career, your most prized accomplishments, was about to be ripped away from you in an instant? That's exactly what happened to me, Luna Davis. 15 years at Skytech Innovations, a company I had helped shape from the ground up, and yet I was the one being tossed aside as if I were nothing more than a footnote in its success story. It was the day they told me my position was being eliminated, the day they said they no longer needed someone like me, someone who had spent her career nurturing innovation. It wasn't a surprise, not really. The signs had been there for weeks, maybe months. As I sat there across from Samantha Riley and Claire, both of them with carefully neutral expressions, I felt something else. It wasn't shock or rage, it was calm. A quiet resignation mixed with a strange sense of clarity. I'd known it was coming, even before the email thread had found its way into my inbox by mistake. My algorithm, the one that powered AccountSphere, their flagship product? It had always been mine, despite what they thought. And when the restructuring announcement came, I didn't flinch. Samantha slid the severance package across the table. 2 weeks for every year of service, health benefits for 3 months, career counseling that I would never use, and I accepted it without a second thought. The words they expected to hear, the protests they thought they would get from a woman in her mid-50s, one who'd given everything to a company that now saw her as disposable. They didn't come. Instead, I nodded and smiled politely. "I understand," I said. I knew what was happening long before they ever did. What they didn't understand, though, was that they'd made a mistake. One that would soon unravel everything they'd worked for. As I walked back to my office, the weight of the moment settled in, but I wasn't thinking about my severance or the corporate politics at play. I was thinking about the message I'd sent just minutes before, the one to Gregory Sullivan, CEO of Precision Tech. The message signaled the beginning of my next chapter. I walked through the halls of Skytech Innovations with a calmness that seemed to unsettle the few who crossed my path. The administrative assistants offered me sympathetic glances, some murmuring their goodbyes as I passed. I had always been a presence in these halls, a constant figure, and now, just like that, I was gone. They couldn't see it yet, but they would soon enough. My departure was just the beginning. The CEO, Caleb Johnson, and his executive team were no doubt already trying to figure out how to move forward without the algorithm that made their flagship product the market leader. My algorithm. Their product. It was almost too perfect, the irony of it all. As I passed by the glass-walled conference room, I could see Caleb on the other side, talking animatedly to his team about quarterly projections. The same man who had presented my work as if it were his own at last year's industry conference. The same man who had stolen the credit, always deflecting the spotlight away from me. I stopped for a moment, watching him, but it wasn't bitterness I felt. It was something deeper, a quiet sense of determination. They didn't understand me, but I understood them. I understood their arrogance. I understood their underestimation of me. Back at my desk, I packed up the few personal items I'd accumulated over the years, conference badges, a coffee mug my team had gifted me last Christmas, framed family photos, and set them carefully into a cardboard box. As I did, I thought about the last time I'd been in this office, how everything felt different now, as if I were a stranger walking through my own life. Then it hit me. This was the moment of change, the moment where I could take control of everything they had overlooked. I opened my drawer and pulled out the folder containing the severance agreement, as well as the internal documentation I had quietly filed away in the months prior. I had seen the writing on the wall, and I had been ready. When the email about restructuring came, I had already begun my research. I had discovered something critical. Skytech had failed to file a patent for my algorithm. Their oversight, their mistake. I hadn't raised an alarm at the time. I had simply kept working, documenting every step of my development. But now, as I packed my things, I knew my next move was already in motion. I had filed the patent on my own, and the rights to the distributed processing algorithm are now in my name. They would never have the luxury of claiming it. As I packed the final item, a small award I had received for the algorithm, I heard a soft knock at the door. Samantha Riley stood in the doorway, her expression neutral, but I could see the faint tension in her posture. Just checking that everything's for your departure, she said, her voice strained with false politeness. She had no idea what was coming. I smiled and nodded. Crystal clear, I replied, placing the award carefully into the box. I didn't let her see the small smile that tugged at my lips. Will you be taking some time off? She asked, a forced note of concern in her voice. I knew the question was coming from a place of politeness, but I couldn't help but smile at the irony of it all. Actually, I said, standing and meeting her gaze, I already have something lined up. I start Monday. Her eyebrows lifted in surprise. That's fast. Anything interesting? I paused, savoring the moment just a little longer. A leadership position. I'm quite excited about it. She nodded absently, clearly eager to move on to the next task at hand. Good luck with that, she said quickly before turning to leave. I watched her go, then closed the door behind her. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to pause and take it all in. The years of hard work, the years of being overlooked, the years of being told I should be grateful just to have a seat at the table. And now, in one final act, I was walking away with everything they had tried to erase. As I left the building for the last time, my keycard surrendered, and, with my box of personal belongings in hand, I glanced back at the glass facade of Skytech Innovations. On the top floor, I could see the executive conference room, still brightly lit. The irony wasn't lost on me. Less than 72 hours from now, that same room would be in full crisis mode, and I'd be on the other side, watching it all unfold. As I stepped into the waiting car, my phone buzzed. A simple text from Gregory Sullivan. It's happening. Let's meet tonight. Part 3. Rising Action. Preparation for the next move. The dinner with Gregory Sullivan at Meridian, the upscale restaurant tucked away from the noise of the city, felt almost surreal. It was an intimate setting, quiet, private, perfect for the conversation we were about to have. We sat in a secluded alcove, surrounded by the soft glow of Japanese screens and the hum of a distant waiter's footsteps. Gregory, always the professional, had already ordered for us, but his mind was elsewhere, his eyes scanning the quiet room, aware of the subtle tension building between us. When the waiter left, he leaned forward, his voice low but charged with a quiet excitement. They did it, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. I suspected they might, but to cut the very person who developed their core technology. Victor never understood what you created. I nodded, taking a sip of water. I had heard all of this before. Gregory had his doubts about Skytech's leadership, but now it was all playing out exactly as I had anticipated. He saw the implementation, the user interface, the marketing potential, I replied. But the underlying architecture? That was just tech stuff to him. That was my work. I smiled at the irony of it all. A few months ago, I had discovered something that could change everything. Skytech had failed to file a patent for my distributed processing algorithm. Their legal team, who had promised to take care of it, had overlooked it. When I found out, I didn't make a fuss. I didn't raise alarms. Instead, I quietly made my plans. I had begun working on refinements to the algorithm, using my equipment and my own time, improvements that boosted efficiency by 43%. The paperwork was straightforward. I filed for the patent under my name, and because I had taken the necessary precautions, documenting everything meticulously, I knew my claim was ironclad. No one could argue it now. Gregory slid a folder across the table, interrupting my thoughts. He smiled as he did, the kind of smile you give when you know you've just sealed someone's fate. All the legal documents are ready. Once you sign, Precision Tech officially acquires exclusive licensing rights to your algorithm. I glanced down at the folder, my mind running through the implications. A 7-figure signing bonus, equity in Precision Tech, royalties from every product using my algorithm. It was everything I had worked for, everything I had built, now in my control. I opened the folder slowly, absorbing the terms, but I had already memorized them. I had known this day would come, and I had prepared for it. What do you think Victor's face will look like when he realizes what's happened? Gregory asked, the satisfaction in his voice barely contained. I chuckled softly. I'm more concerned about my team, I said, glancing up at him. They don't deserve to be caught in the fallout. Gregory raised his glass, his eyes gleaming with approval. Don't worry about them. We have positions for all 6 of them, senior roles and significant raises. If they're interested, they'll be welcome here. I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. I signed the final page, sealing my future. With one move, I had protected my team, secured my place in the industry, and delivered a blow to SkyTech that would make their failure undeniable. Gregory's eyes lit up as he looked at me. To new beginnings. He raised his glass, and I clinked mine against his. I felt the weight of the decision settle around me, but there was no fear, no doubt, just the anticipation of what was to come. The next few days passed in a blur. There were exit interviews, knowledge transfer meetings, and goodbyes to colleagues who had no idea what was going on behind the scenes. I maintained my professional composure, but inside I was already thinking about the future. I documented every project, every password, and every process. I wanted to leave nothing behind that could be used against me. I wasn't being kind. I was leaving evidence of my good faith while knowing full well that SkyTech would soon find out just how valuable I had been to their operations. As the final day at SkyTech loomed closer, I found myself growing more detached from the company I had once given so much. During my last exit interview, Claire from HR went through the standard checklist with robotic efficiency. You understand that any intellectual property developed during your employment remains the property of SkyTech? She asked, her eyes barely meeting mine. I smiled politely. Anything developed within the scope of my employment, using company resources and company time, I emphasized, the slight edge to my voice making it clear that I wasn't going to let anyone twist the truth. But the patent is mine. Claire didn't seem to catch the subtlety in my response as she pushed the non-disclosure agreement across the table. Of course. She didn't press further. It was too late for them to do anything about it. I finished packing my items, the last one being a small memento from my team, a token of their appreciation for the work we had done together. The door to my office closed behind me for the last time, and as I made my way to the elevator, I paused for a moment and looked back at the sleek glass building where it all began. I had built something here. I had made a difference. But it wasn't about nostalgia. It wasn't about the people I had left behind. It was about what was coming next. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside, ready for what was to come. By the time the press release went live, I had already settled into my new role at Precision Tech. The contract was signed, the paperwork was filed, and the first step of my new journey had begun. But as I sat at my new desk, the hum of the office around me felt almost surreal. A corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows, a team of engineers eager to work with me, and the knowledge that everything I had worked for, everything I had built, was finally mine to shape. The real impact, though, was still unfolding. SkyTech Innovations had no idea what was about to hit them. At exactly 7 a.m., my phone buzzed with a message from Gregory Sullivan. Press release is live. Industry news will be picking it up soon. I smiled and opened the company's internal communications tool, where I saw the announcement, beautifully worded. Precision Tech acquires exclusive rights to revolutionary distributed processing algorithm. Welcomes creator Luna Davis as Chief Innovation Officer. The article not only announced the acquisition, but also emphasized my role as the sole inventor of the technology, something that SkyTech had failed to do despite my central role in the creation of their flagship product, AccountSphere. It wasn't just about the algorithm anymore, it was about control. And now, I held all the cards. By 9:15 a.m., I was deep in a meeting with my new team, discussing the next phase of development. Precision Tech was eager to refine the algorithm further, and early tests were showing a 51% performance boost, better than even I had projected. There was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that my vision was being fully realized, without the constraints of SkyTech's corporate bureaucracy. Here, my ideas were heard. Here, I was seen. As we delved deeper into the data, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Miguel, one of my trusted engineers from SkyTech, who had also followed me to Precision Tech. His message was simple, but the chaos it described was palpable. Complete chaos here. What did you do? I quickly responded, check your email. All 6 of you have offers waiting. The message, of course, referred to the 6 engineers I had mentored at SkyTech. each one now being offered a senior role at Precision Tech. It was my way of ensuring they didn't suffer from the fallout of my departure. As they readied to leave SkyTech, their knowledge and expertise, my expertise, would go with them. The strength of my team would be their downfall. Meanwhile, across town at SkyTech's headquarters, things were beginning to unravel quickly. By 9:30 a.m., the usual Monday morning executive meeting was no longer routine. I could almost hear the panic from here as Victor Lawson, SkyTech's CEO, had to face the reality of losing the core technology that powered their product. Miguel's updates came in fast and furious, painting a vivid picture of the scene unfolding inside the glass-walled conference room at SkyTech. Victor was pacing back and forth, demanding explanations from the legal team. "How could we have missed this?" he was shouting. "Where's the patent? Who's responsible for this?" The legal team scrambled, pulling up every file and document they could find related to my work. It didn't take long for them to realize that the patent was not in SkyTech's name, something they had never bothered to correct despite my repeated inquiries. And now, in an instant, they were left with a situation that could not be undone. I had already filed the patent months ago, long before their plan to push me out had come to fruition. By noon, the effects were starting to ripple through the industry. SkyTech's stock had dropped by 7%, and Precision Tech's stock had surged by 12%. The media was beginning to pick up on the story, and within hours, industry analysts were speculating about what this meant for SkyTech's future. How could the company survive without its flagship technology? But it wasn't just about the stock market anymore. SkyTech was being forced into a corner. They could either negotiate with Precision Tech for a licensing agreement or attempt to rebuild their core technology from scratch, a process that would take years and millions in development costs. The message I had sent to Gregory was simple: this is only the beginning. And it was. By 3:00 p.m., I received a call from Victor Lawson himself. It was clear from the desperation in his voice that things were escalating quickly. "Luna," he said, practically pleading through the phone, "there seems to have been a misunderstanding. Please, let's talk. We need to work something out." I knew better than to engage in a conversation like that. I simply forwarded the message to Precision Tech's legal team with a brief note. No response until they reach out with a real offer. The fallout was just beginning, and I wasn't about to let them dictate the terms. As I settled into my new role, enjoying the respect I had long been denied, I couldn't help but reflect on the transformation that had taken place. Just a few days ago, I was the one being forced out, seen as replaceable, dismissed without a second thought. Now I was leading a team of brilliant engineers, making decisions that would shape the future of the industry. And SkyTech? They were scrambling to catch up. It felt good to be seen, to finally have the recognition that had eluded me for so long. I had earned it, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. The next few days were a blur of transition. Meetings, briefings, and the steady rhythm of settling into a new role. I stood in front of my new team at Precision Tech, a group of sharp, eager engineers who were just as ready as I was to leave the past behind and push forward into uncharted territory. Every day felt like a new opportunity to show the industry and myself just what I was capable of when I wasn't being stifled by corporate politics. Meanwhile, across town, SkyTech was spiraling further into chaos. Victor Lawson had not yet accepted the magnitude of his miscalculation. The company was desperate, scrambling to put out fires as the weight of losing its flagship product became undeniable. Miguel kept me updated throughout the week, his texts are reminders of just how far ahead I was, and just how quickly SkyTech was falling apart. By Thursday, it was clear that things were reaching a breaking point. Tech publications had started to run speculative pieces asking whether SkyTech could survive the algorithm crisis. Analysts were noting the severe impact on their Q3 projections, and Victor had become a lightning rod for industry criticism. No one knew how deep the mistake went until it was too late. But what struck me most was the reaction from the employees. Miguel and the others in my old team were getting whispers from SkyTech's staff, rumors that their leadership was preparing to make a public statement. A strategy meeting had been scheduled for the end of the week, and it seemed likely that Victor Lawson would finally have to acknowledge the disaster. I'd been expecting it. What I hadn't expected was how quickly SkyTech's stock would start to plummet. By Friday afternoon, the company's valuation had dropped another 16%, and whispers of mass layoffs were circulating. It was clear to me that they were facing an existential crisis, one that wasn't just about a single algorithm, it was about trust. Trust in leadership, trust in their ability to innovate, and trust in their people. For the first time, I felt a pang of something I hadn't expected: sympathy. Miguel wasn't the only one suffering from this failure. The engineers, the staff, my former colleagues, were caught in the crossfire. They hadn't asked for this, and now they were about to bear the brunt of a leadership mistake that would cost everyone dearly. Still, I couldn't afford to soften my resolve. Precision Tech was counting on me, and I had a responsibility to ensure that we stayed ahead, that we moved quickly, and that we didn't become complacent. The industry's shift was already underway. SkyTech was crumbling beneath its mismanagement, and now it was my time to rise. The following week, things escalated even further. SkyTech's legal team finally reached out. The message was clear. They wanted to negotiate a licensing deal, 3 times the industry standard rate. The irony was not lost on me. The very people who had dismissed me, who had failed to secure the rights to the algorithm I had created, were now begging for a piece of it. I forwarded the message to Precision Tech's legal team with a simple note: don't settle for anything less than a public acknowledgement of my role. They need to understand just how deep they've screwed up. I wasn't going to allow them to walk away from this unscathed. They had taken my contributions for granted for far too long, and now it was time for them to pay the price. Throughout the week, the news kept coming in. SkyTech's stock continued to drop, and their internal meetings only seemed to get more desperate. Victor, in particular, was trying to salvage what little credibility he had left. But it was too late. The industry was watching, and SkyTech's fall from grace was playing out in real time. I focused on my work. At Precision Tech, we were taking the distributed processing algorithm to new heights. The improvements we were making were groundbreaking, far surpassing anything I had done at SkyTech. Miguel and the others, now working under my leadership, were free to innovate without the corporate shackles that had held us back before. The contrast was stark. Here, I was recognized. My ideas were valued, not appropriated. Strangely, the satisfaction came not from watching SkyTech's demise, but from knowing that finally I was in control of my success. I had worked for this moment, and now it was mine to shape. And then, the final confirmation came. SkyTech was in full crisis mode. By the end of the week, they had announced an emergency leadership change. Victor Lawson was stepping down. I couldn't help but smile when I saw the news. It wasn't just about the algorithm anymore. It was about everything. The years of being overlooked, the years of corporate backstabbing, it all culminated in this single moment. Victor was no longer in charge, and SkyTech's board had finally realized the cost of their mismanagement. For the first time, I allowed myself to savor the victory. It wasn't about revenge, it was about recognition. Precision Tech was thriving, SkyTech was floundering, and I was exactly where I belonged. It's funny how quickly things can change. One moment you're dismissed as irrelevant, a casualty of corporate restructuring. Next, you're at the helm of a company that values your contributions and gives you the freedom to shape the future. A little over a week after Victor Lawson's departure from SkyTech, the dust had settled, but the shift in the industry was permanent. Precision Tech was now the talk of the town, and I was at the center of it all. By Monday morning, I had already seen the first sign of just how much my life had changed. The invitation to speak at the National Technology Innovation Conference had arrived, a keynote. Me. The woman who had once been dismissed without a second glance was now being asked to stand before an audience of industry leaders, sharing my story, my vision, and the work that had revolutionized the tech world. It wasn't just about the algorithm anymore. It was about the industry recognizing that people like me, innovators who had been pushed to the sidelines for too long, had something valuable to offer. I wasn't just the person who created the algorithm. I was a symbol of what happens when people are finally given the credit they deserve. As I stood at the podium, the room filled with tech leaders and journalists, and I took a deep breath. This was it. It had taken years of hard work, frustration, and doubt, but I had finally made it. I looked out at the audience, seeing the faces of women engineers, young developers, and entrepreneurs who were hanging on my every word. I could feel the weight of the moment. This was my chance to leave a mark, not just on the industry, but on those who would follow in my footsteps. I began, my voice steady but filled with conviction. Innovation isn't anonymous, I said, the words flowing easily now. It comes from real people, and it's time we recognize that. As I spoke, I shared the story of my journey, how I had been overlooked for years, how I had been told that my work didn't matter. But it did matter. And now, here I was, standing at the front of the room, not hidden in the back as I had been at Skytech, but front and center. The recognition that had eluded me for so long had finally come. The applause that followed was thunderous, and for the first time I truly felt seen. The days that followed were equally rewarding. Skytech, under new leadership, had finally acknowledged my contributions. Their press release, a full week after my keynote, confirmed what the industry had known for days. They had reached an agreement with Precision Tech, licensing my algorithm at an exorbitant rate, with a public acknowledgement of my role as the creator. Their stock had stabilized, though it was clear the damage had been done. The damage to their reputation, to their credibility, was irreversible. Gregory Sullivan called me that evening to congratulate me on the success of the conference. "It's official," he said. "We've got the press, we've got the deals, and now we've got the recognition you deserve." I smiled, leaning back in my chair. "It's not about the press, Gregory. It's about making sure this never happens again. Making sure the next generation of innovators doesn't have to fight for recognition the way I did." Gregory chuckled, his voice warm with approval. "Well, you've certainly set the bar high for them." The next few months passed in a whirlwind. At Precision Tech, my team continued to push the boundaries of what we could achieve with the algorithm. The work we were doing was groundbreaking, and I was finally able to share my full potential with a team that understood and respected the value of my contributions. We released 3 new products, each built on the foundation of the algorithm that had once been stolen from me. Our market share grew, and we quickly became the industry leader. Then, the final confirmation of everything I had worked for came. Precision Tech surpassed Skytech in market valuation. It wasn't just a financial victory. It was the culmination of everything I had fought for: recognition, respect, and ownership of my work. Richard Donovan, the interim CEO at Skytech, reached out to me with a respectful email. The subject line read, "A fair licensing arrangement." It wasn't much, but it was enough. "We've learned an expensive lesson about valuing our innovators," he admitted, "and we'd like to make amends." I forwarded the email to Gregory with a simple message. Phase 1 complete. The terms we had agreed upon were more than fair, but it wasn't just about the licensing agreement. It was about showing the world that when innovators are undervalued, the consequences can be catastrophic. As I sat at my desk at Precision Tech, reviewing quarterly reports, the weight of everything I had accomplished began to settle in. I was no longer the woman pushed to the edge of corporate life, struggling to be recognized. I was now the Chief Innovation Officer at one of the most influential tech companies in the world. My name was attached to the algorithm that had changed an industry, and I had secured a place in history as one of its true pioneers. And yet, as I looked back at the road that had led me here, I realized something profound. It was never about revenge. It was never about getting back at the people who had tried to silence me. It was about recognition, about ensuring that those who create and who innovate are valued for what they bring to the world. It was about showing that the real power lies in ownership. Ownership of your work, your ideas, and your future. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the office, I leaned back in my chair and allowed myself a moment of quiet reflection. I had finally done it. It seems we've reached the end of the story I was developing. The journey that Luna Davis took, from being dismissed after years of hard work, to reclaiming her intellectual property and rising as a leader in her new company, has come full circle. She's achieved recognition, success, and leadership, making her an icon for others who feel undervalued or overlooked. If you'd like to explore any further twists, character developments, or new angles, feel free to let me know how you'd like the story to continue, or if there's any specific direction you want to take next.